we go.
All right, thank you, Gary. Good morning, all.
Good morning, Matt.
Apparently, it's news to most that Pastor Tim is not here, obviously, from my presence. He has taken ill and asked me to fill in. So, between you and I, don't tell him. Let me think. Sharon went to Arizona, and Pastor Tim got sick. Think those... I'm not insinuating anything, but, one never knows. Wouldn't be the first time that, I don't feel very good. I can't go to work.
Matt, I'm taping this.
Oh. Tim, I'm just kidding. But again, welcome all. And it was brought to my attention that you all are not doing a midweek Lenten worship service. Is that correct? Then let me extend an invitation if any of you would like to join us at St. Mark's, Pastor Tim's other church. We are at 3515 East Van Norman Avenue in Cudahy. That's roughly Packard and Van Norman Avenue. We are doing a Bible study at 5 o'clock, and then we have a soup supper at 6 with the worship to follow at 7. So if anyone is looking for a midweek Lenten worship service, feel free to join us for worship at 7 or all three. If you want to come at 5, make a whole evening of it. So that be that. We would love to have you and let you celebrate this Lenten season along with us. So with that, there are a few other announcements, and obviously there's no screens for which to follow along today. Apparently there's some AV, audiovisual, information technology, IT issues in the building now between those that know and those of us that don't know. So the screens are not working today, so this may be a little disjointed. You can read the other announcements in the bulletin today. So we can continue, and I will say this again, that we'll get the important stuff done and said and whatnot. Maybe a little kind of clunky or disjointed today, but we'll get through it all, and we'll say it might not be at the exact correct time or as smoothly as it normally goes, but we'll get through this. So let us begin with our call to worship. Let us draw near to God.
Let us put down the weights we carry.
Let us open ourselves to God's Spirit.
Let us come again to be filled.
Open our hearts to receive your love.
Make us a vessel of your love for the world.
You can follow along not on the screens with the hymn, but on the bulletin.
Today's reading is from the book of Mark. They were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. They were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. He took the 12 aside again and again, and began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, "Look, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him and spit upon him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise again." James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Appoint us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to him, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left, is not mine to appoint, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. Instead, whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life for a ransom for many." They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Here ends today's reading.
In that reading, a couple of things kind of stood out to me. First is that story kind of helps me relate to Jesus as a parent. It is what it kind of seems like. I see myself as a parent in that situation. And secondly is how I can read the Bible and read the same thing multiple times and something different sticks out to me each time I read it. So today's reading and in the past few weeks have really shown me a more personal side of Jesus. To me, he seems much more relatable in this journey with the disciples. I do see myself as a parent in this kind of this storyline. It started back in chapter 8, and when Jesus and disciples are traveling town to town, village to village. So, like I say, from the 8th chapter of Mark and through this one, the storyline, the overall kind of story arc of it kind of repeats itself. First thing that repeats is Jesus predicts his death, his torture, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. And then the second one is the disciples don't understand. They question Jesus. And the third was then Jesus teaches them about discipleship and about what is to come. And that makes me think, how many times in history does that repeat itself? Where we continue to think that we know better than Jesus how to live and act. Jesus, through the Bible now, we look back and our faith teaches us one way, but we think we always can do better. And that's kind of where the parent, my role as a parent comes in. You raise your kids up to be independent and not rely on you for everything, and it's painful to watch some of the decisions that they make. But you have to let them. It's part of their journey and their growing to independence. The three places, like I say, back in Mark chapter 8 was the prediction of Jesus' death the first time, and then again in the 9th chapter, and then again in today's reading in the 10th chapter. All three times it's the same thing. Jesus says the Son of Man will be turned over to the so-and-so. I don't know the exact verses, but it's the same thing. And then right after that, in each chapter, 8, 9, and 10, it's followed by the disciples' misunderstanding, not really knowing what is coming and not really knowing what to do in questioning. And then there's Jesus teaching how they should be, what they should do, how they should do it, who they should do it with. And again, that is 8, 9, and 10. The three things just kind of comes. And like I say, that to me sounds like my parenting journey. In our attempt to grow wonderful, productive adult children and not rely on us, it's kind of the same thing where I'm not predicting my death to my children, saying I'm not going to be here. But in the same respect, it's similar where, you see, you can't rely on us, your parents all the time. You have to do it for yourself. So in a way, we're not going to be there for them, much like Jesus is saying that I'm not going to be here. And my wife and I were just talking about that last week. And with some other friends of ours, their son had made a few decisions, and they said, it's painful. And it's heart-wrenching to watch him make this decision, which, as a parent looking on it, it's crystal clear that it's the wrong decision, to us anyway. But like I said, you have to let them go along with it. It's part of their growing up, and Jesus does the same thing over and over and over and over, never failing. His love for us is always there, no matter how many bad choices we make and how often we don't listen to his teaching. These 3 chapters spell that out, at least to me, in my mind. And the views represented here do not represent the King of Glory or the Greater Milwaukee Synod of the Lutheran Church or ELCA as a whole. This is my belief. This is my faith. That kind of storyline where Jesus, predicting what's going to happen, and then the disciples not believing and questioning, and then Jesus teaching. The way my mind related it to myself was I thought of like an old family trip where we were in a long car ride. We were going out west. We were going to, I think, Grand Canyon or Yosemite National Park or whatever it was. The end of our journey wasn't Jesus' death on the cross by any means, like the Jesus and his disciples are in this journey, but we were in the car, and I imagined Jesus like that on these travels from village to village. He's going along. Jesus' dad is driving the car, and his disciples, the kids, are kind of bickering amongst themselves in the back seat, and always question, are we there yet? How much longer? I have to go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. Can we stop? I want to go. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. All of that bickering. And finally, Jesus has enough and then just tells it how it is. This, okay, enough. Don't make me pull this car over type of thing, And that's not very biblically correct for me to think that way. But that's how I relate it and how I see Jesus in a personal way to me. So I don't truly believe that Jesus would ever really get, very angry at people. Yeah, he might get a little mad and blow off a little steam at time to time, but he never really meant to lash out, meanly or crossly or sternly at people like that. The journey that Jesus and his disciples are on, so you have that whole story kind of repeating itself, but in the 8th chapter and in the 10th chapter, before and after this traveling and teaching and whatnot, there was a story of healing a blind man. There was one at the beginning of this, and now today with the healing, restoring of sight of Bartimaeus. So that, I think, in the 8th chapter of Mark, Jesus laid his healing hands on the man twice. That man wasn't named like he was in Bartimaeus was in today's reading, but he laid his healing hand on the man twice, and it was, his sight was restored. That's again where Jesus has to repeat himself. This whole story repeated itself. Jesus had to repeat himself to that man to restore his sight. And then today, in the 10th chapter, Bartimaeus called to Jesus. He shouted to him. Shouting to him, that to me is the kids in the back seat yelling at Dad. That's that noise. But then Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" He didn't lash out. He didn't say, "Go away." He turned with love and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the man's response was, "I want to see." And Jesus replies, "Your faith has healed you." That's where, I'm sorry, that gets me a little worked up. That's where Jesus teaches. So that is kind of the whole, in those two healing of the blind men, that same thing just repeats itself. That seems to be the overarching story, if you will. And I believe these two stories of restoring the sight of the men are used to teach us to see clearly. It's not just a story thrown in there to, promote Jesus or say that Jesus did another 2 miracles by saying, he restored sight to somebody. I believe without Jesus, all of us are blind. And with Jesus' tender, loving, healing hands, we see clearly. With his word, with the Bible, we see clearly. That same storyline plays out in the healing that was in the rest of the journey. Jesus repeats himself over and over. We doubt it. And then Jesus teaches us, or Jesus heals us, whatever the case may be. And the thing that's just fantastic about these two stories is Jesus is present and serving to the least of men. Here's a blind beggar on the side of the road who just hears that Jesus is coming and cries out to him. Jesus is there for the lowest, the least of us. It says in today's reading in verse 31, it says, "But many who are first will be last, and the last first." If you also remember back in today's reading where James and John had asked to sit on either side of Jesus in heaven, and he says something to the effect that it is for those who it has been destined or predetermined or prepared for. I believe that's what Jesus is saying. The least of us, the least will be first in the kingdom of heaven. They will have the place of honor with God and Jesus. Again, that's my belief. I hope you have the same thing. Let's see. We as people are misunderstanding and always question Jesus. Jesus teaches us and heals us, and it repeats over and over. We see or hear Jesus, we doubt Jesus, Jesus teaches. One last kind of little trip in my thought process and how I handle and relate to the Bible. In the healing of Bartimaeus, Jesus asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" That's verse 51. Simple question. What do you want me to do for you? Think about that for a minute. Jesus asking, "What do you want me to do for you?" I've been thinking about that question for a long time, but really thinking about it this past week. And I have no idea how I would respond to that question. No clue. That might be one of those questions that I have to wait until I can ask Jesus when in his glory in heaven. I'm going to add that to the list of things I want to talk to him about. Okay, well, you asked what you could do for us. All right, this is what I'm asking. What I'll ask him then, I don't know. I'll have to wait until I see him and see what comes to mind. So my thought to leave with you is, what do you truly want from Jesus? Amen.